Hello. Okay, so another video. This one's a little more botany focused than plant medicine um, because I want to talk about three different, very common, essentially bushes that we have here in the Northeast and throughout North America that are a little bit difficult to distinguish from each other. So those three plants are all in the rose family, actually, and it's blackberry, raspberry, and rose. And these are all the wild species that you would find commonly growing around. And yeah, just a little bit about how to ID them and tell them apart for using or just for eating the fruits or admiring. So I'm going to start with blackberry. So blackberry and raspberry are the most similar. They're both actually in the same genus. They're both rubus, whereas the rose that I'm going to show you is rosa is the genus. So it's probably the most different, and the fruit is very different. But when first learning them, they can all look quite similar, and they all sort of grow in this similar tendency with these arching canes and similar leaf structure. So they can be very hard to tell apart. And very similar flowers that bloom pretty much all around the same time. The flowers are definitely different and the fruits are all easy to distinguish. So this is basically the ID for when those more distinguishing features are not present. So when it's not flowering or it's not fruiting and you can't tell them apart based on those things. So I'm going to show all the different sort of large plant structures as well as the leaves. So this is the blackberry cane, and so this is, I'll start with the leaf. Let me cut it off. Okay, so this is one blackberry leaf. Each of these is considered a leaflet. So the whole leaf is this sort of star-shaped 5-leaflet leaf, and that's the most common shape for any blackberry species. So this is considered a compound leaf when it has leaflets. So a simple leaf is just one whole structure. Maybe it has some lobes or some serrations, but it doesn't have deep cuts or separate pieces. A compound leaf has these separate little leaflets, and this is the leaf stem down here, and then this is considered a palmately compound leaf because the way that it looks sort of similar to like a hand, a palm, where all the little leaflets are coming off of the same point at the base. You could also say it looks star-shaped, but it's botanically called palmate compound. Versus, I'll show you the rose is a great example of the opposite type of compound leaf. This is considered pinnately compound. So it's a compound leaf, so it has these distinct little tiny leaflets, but they come off along the leaf stem, along the rachis there, as opposed to all from this converging at the same point and resembling the palm of a hand. So that's one way to distinguish the blackberry leaf, is that it has these palmately compound leaves. And then if you look at the cane, blackberries have much sharper, thicker thorns. You can kind of see them on there. So grabbing a blackberry plant would be, or being grabbed by a blackberry plant, would be more painful, and they break off less easily. They're sort of more of like a stronger structured, sharp piece. And then if you can, brace yourselves and get in between these thorns, you'll see that the stem of this blackberry cane is not round. It's many-sided. It sort of doesn't have that strong of an appearance, but when you roll it between your fingers, it's a little more straight and structured with angles. But a really great way to also tell that is to cut it and look inside. So You probably can't see it on this little camera, but if you look at the pith, which is the structure that, it's basically like the inner structure of a branch or something like this, a cane, which is sort of in between herbaceous plant and tree. More often it would be considered lumped with like trees and shrubs in botany. So it has a pith, and if you cut into it, you can see much more distinctly that it's many-sided as opposed to round. It sort of looks like a star, and so it has 5 sides, so it's got this star-shaped pith. So that's a great way to ID it. So then this is the raspberry cane, and you can see that it's a lot lighter in color, and that's one of raspberry's distinct features. Is, well, so it does, the thorns on the raspberry are, they're not really thorns technically, they're considered spines. They're still very sharp, but structurally they're a little different, and they can be brushed away a little bit more easily. They're just a little easier to handle. So the leaf of the raspberry looks very similar. It's a little harder to tell that it's pinnately compound than that rose, because it normally just has 3 leaflets as opposed to the many tiny leaflets that we saw on that rose. But it's pinnately compound as opposed to palmate as well. And then a distinguishing feature of it is that if you turn it over onto its underside, it's a lot lighter in color. It's like basically this almost like waxy white color underneath. And I'll show you the blackberry again to compare. So, the lighting's not great, but the blackberry is basically the same color on both sides, and the raspberry is green on the top and then this like bluish white underneath. And you can also tell that very, very distinctly from the cane is a lot lighter in color as well. And the raspberry cane is completely round and very smooth. And then it also has this almost well, not almost, it has a waxiness to it. Botanically, the term for that is glaucous. So it's waxy, and if you rub it, it will kind of rub off. And later in the winter, these canes, as they age, will turn almost a purple color, and it'll be very visible once all the leaves are gone. The difference between the blackberry canes, which turn a darker sort of reddish brown, and these lighter colored raspberry canes turn a waxy purple. They maintain that waxiness, but then they get purple. So this is a younger cane that's so bright green. Okay, so that's raspberry. And then rose, I showed you the leaflet. This is just a segment of a rose cane. Also round, also green, not waxy, pinnately compound leaves, many leaflets, not white and waxy underneath either. Sharp thorns, so sharp, much like the blackberry. The wild rose is a little bit easier to distinguish based on some of those differences, but pinnately compound as well. Similar structure, round cane, but not waxy, not white underneath. Yeah, so that's just a good way to ID them. They all have definitely medicinal uses, very different. One thing that I would say about them all is that they're astringent and very tonifying, so they can all be used interchangeably if necessary, but they do have their specific applications that are much more specific to their unique preferences and actions in the body. The wild rose, it's mostly the flowers that are used. The blackberry, it's mostly the root that's used. And then the raspberry is the common raspberry leaf. It tends to be, red raspberry that's cultivated, but I definitely use the wild raspberry leaf because it's so abundant here. So, and then astringency is just a common feature of all their different applications in the body. So hopefully that's helpful for IDing these plants and helping if you want to use some of them and just distinguish from the great green mass of thorny canes that is sometimes blocking the entrance to the woods. So yeah,